They told me I was too impoverished to be admitted into their esteemed medical group, the one that carried my own family's surname. But as they entered the boardroom that morning, they were unaware that I was the one who issued the checks for the entire hospital network that had just acquired them. It was me. I merely nodded and uttered 3 words. Let's begin. My name is Alyssa Herbert, and I am 36 years old. That morning in the boardroom was not the first time my family had overlooked me, but it would be the last time they held any influence over me. Growing up in Colby Ridge, I was surrounded by all the markers of prosperity. Our colonial-style house was situated on 3 acres of meticulously kept grounds, and the Herbert Medical Associates sign shone brightly at the entrance to the town's most distinguished medical facility. My parents, Dr. Richard and Dr. Catherine Herbert, had established their practice from its inception, molding it into what they proudly referred to as a medical dynasty. From my earliest memories, when I could barely grasp a stethoscope, my future was already mapped out. You will become a physician, just like Matthew, my mother would often say, adjusting my collar before yet another tedious medical conference. There, I would be showcased like a prospective investment. Matthew, my brother who was 4 years my senior, had wholeheartedly embraced this destiny. He would shadow our father during patient visits, finding enjoyment in poring over anatomy texts, and discuss medicine with a devotion typically reserved for matters of faith. However, I perceived things differently. While Matthew concentrated on individual patients, I observed the broader context. I noticed the inefficient appointment scheduling that resulted in patients waiting for extended periods, the outdated billing procedures that imposed undue hardship on families, and the poor communication between different medical departments. When I was 16, I developed a novel appointment system for the practice using my laptop, which had the potential to decrease waiting times by 40%. I presented this proposal to my parents during dinner, eager about the prospect of assisting more individuals. My father gave it a cursory glance. Alyssa, you must concentrate on your pre-medical requirements. This administrative work is for those who cannot succeed in medicine. At the time, I didn't realize it, but that was the initial fissure in the established order. Throughout my high school years, I adhered to expectations. I enrolled in advanced placement biology and chemistry courses, volunteered at the hospital, and maintained the grade point average befitting a future Dr. Herbert. Yet, in my spare moments, I avidly read books on healthcare administration, studied the operational models of successful hospital networks, and pursued online certifications in business management. I concealed these passions as if they were illicit items, aware they would be perceived as deviations from my intended path. The turning point occurred during my final year of university. I had received acceptance letters from multiple medical schools, a piece of news my parents shared with everyone they encountered. However, unbeknownst to them, I had also been diligently working towards a dual degree in healthcare administration. When I finally mustered the resolve to inform them of my desire to pursue a Master of Business Administration rather than a medical doctor degree, their response was far more severe than I had anticipated. "You are squandering your future," my mother declared, her tone cutting, laced with dismay. "Do you have any comprehension of how many individuals would cherish the prospects you possess?" My father was more blunt. "If you are not going to be a physician, then what precisely do you intend to offer to this family?" He let out a laugh, but it was devoid of any mirth. "That is for individuals who lack the intelligence or ambition for genuine medical practice." Matthew, who was visiting from his residency, sighed and shook his head. "Come on, Liz, you're more intelligent than this. Why would you aspire to be a desk jockey when you could genuinely save lives?" But it was what transpired immediately afterward that irrevocably determined my path. I had accumulated savings from my summer employment and internships, totaling approximately $30,000, and I presented them with an offer. "Allow me to invest in the practice, even if it's just 20%. I will modernize the systems, enhance efficiency, and assist you in expanding. We could potentially triple your patient capacity without compromising the quality of care." The ensuing silence was profound. Then, my father began to laugh. This time, it was genuine laughter, the kind that caused my cheeks to flush with profound embarrassment. $30,000, he scoffed. That barely covers the cost of a new MRI machine. You think you can buy your way into Herbert Medical Associates with pocket change? He looked at Matthew, then back at me. You're young, naive, and clearly don't understand the sacrifices it takes to build something like this. You're dismissed. He gestured to the door, and Matthew, ever the loyal son, put his arm around my father's shoulder and steered him out of the room, leaving me alone with my humiliation. I walked out of that house and never looked back. I took my $30,000 and enrolled in a top-tier MBA program. I worked harder than I ever had before, driven by a burning desire to prove them wrong. I graduated at the top of my class and landed a job at a prestigious consulting firm, specializing in healthcare. I spent the next decade climbing the corporate ladder, building a reputation for my sharp intellect and innovative strategies. I advised hospitals, healthcare systems, and even government agencies on how to improve their operations. I never forgot Colby Ridge, or the way my family had dismissed me. It fueled my ambition. I watched Herbert Medical Associates from afar, seeing its steady, yet unremarkable, growth. They never embraced new technologies, never streamlined their processes, never truly adapted. They were coasting on the family name, content with their outdated practices. When the opportunity arose to acquire the hospital system that encompassed their practice, I didn't hesitate. I leveraged my connections, my capital, and my reputation. I made an aggressive offer, one that couldn't be refused. And now, here I was, the owner of the entire hospital system, and they, my former gatekeepers, were about to walk into a boardroom where I held all the cards. Me? That is absurd, he stated, dabbing his eyes. Alyssa, this practice is valued in the millions. You couldn't even afford the carpeting in our waiting area. And even if you possess the financial means, why would we consider a glorified administrative assistant as a partner? My mother placed a hand on his arm, her voice dripping with condescension. Darling, she began, her tone patronizing, I understand your intentions are good, but you must maintain a sense of realism. You are currently unable to repay your student loans without our financial assistance. How could you possibly believe you are prepared for this magnitude of responsibility? Furthermore, Matthew interjected, his disinterest palpable, the practice will remain under the stewardship of qualified physicians. That is the essence of the Herbert name, medical distinction, not mere calculations. I remained seated, the business proposal tightly grasped in my hands, feeling diminished, as I had when I was a child. They were not simply refusing my offer, they were rejecting me as a person. Everything I had strived for, everything I believed I could offer. You are correct, I stated softly, rising from the dinner table. I met each of their gazes. And I will no longer require your assistance with my student loans, I continued. My mother's fork slipped from her grasp, clattering against her plate. Do not be melodramatic, Alyssa. You cannot possibly manage that. I will manage, I interrupted, my voice exhibiting a steadiness that belied my inner turmoil. Many individuals accomplish this daily. Individuals who are not members of the Herbert family. That evening, I gathered my belongings. I left behind the credit cards, the keys to the BMW they had purchased for me, and even the jewelry adorned with the family crest. If I was deemed insufficient to be a Herbert in their estimation, then I would forge my own path, unassisted by their name opening opportunities for me. The final words I heard as I departed were my father's voice calling out, tinged with more irritation than genuine worry. When you finally grasp the harsh realities of the world, we will be here for you, but do not anticipate this offer to remain available indefinitely. I did not turn back. Not at that moment, nor for the subsequent 15 years. The initial 6 months were the most challenging. I relocated to a studio apartment located 40 miles from Colby Ridge, in an area where the Herbert name held no significance. The walls were thin, the heating system was unreliable, and I could discern my neighbor's television through the walls at all times. However, it was my own dwelling, financed entirely by my earnings from 3 part-time positions. I served as a waitress at a diner near the university during the morning rush, tutored statistics in the afternoons, and replenished stock at a medical supply store 3 evenings a week. My day commenced at 4:30 a.m. and concluded long after midnight. On more than one occasion, I fell asleep on the bus and consequently missed my intended stop, adding an additional hour to an already overwhelmingly demanding schedule. The financial aid office became a familiar sanctuary. Deprived of my parents' support, I was compelled to navigate the intricate landscape of student loans, work-study programs, and scholarship applications. I learned to subsist on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, to repair my clothing rather than purchasing new items, and to walk instead of utilizing public transportation when I needed to conserve an additional $2. My family made a single attempt to contact me. 3 months after my departure, a substantial envelope arrived at my apartment. It contained a check for $50,000 and a note penned in my mother's hand: "Cease this foolishness and return home. Medical school commences in the autumn." I returned it, writing only 3 words on the exterior: "No, thank you." Following that incident, the silence from them was absolute. Through shared acquaintances, I learned that they were informing others that I was taking a sabbatical to embark on a journey of self-discovery, and would be returning shortly. Then, as it became evident that I would not be returning, the narrative shifted. They claimed I was exploring different passions or traveling. Eventually, they simply ceased mentioning my existence altogether. The transition from aspiring medical student to healthcare administrator was more than a mere change of academic focus. It represented a profound discovery of my true identity. In my operations management courses, I found my calling. Each case study, every challenge of process optimization, every discourse on healthcare systems felt akin to returning to a beloved home. My professors recognized my fervent engagement, most notably Dr. Sarah Winters, who instructed healthcare systems design. "You possess a rather unconventional viewpoint, Alyssa," she remarked after I had presented a proposed redesign of emergency room workflows that had the potential to decrease patient wait times by 60%. "You approach challenges with a perspective informed by both the patient and the provider experience," I confessed, explaining that my family owned a medical practice, though I quickly clarified, however, I am no longer in contact with them. Dr. Winters observed me intently for a moment before stating simply, "Their loss." She then inquired, "Have you given any thought to where you would like to complete your administrative residency?" That conversation proved to be a pivotal moment. Dr. Winters possessed valuable connections within Havenbrook Medical, a mid-sized hospital network recognized for its forward-thinking approach and ambitious growth strategies. She made a phone call, and shortly thereafter, I was presented with an interview opportunity for a paid internship that held the potential to evolve into a permanent role. On the day of the interview, I stood before my slightly cracked mirror, donning my finest and only suit, a find from a second-hand store that I had tailored using money earned from tips. I presented myself as professional and capable, a stark contrast to the young woman who had relinquished a substantial inheritance. This was precisely the image I intended to project. The interview panel subjected me to a rigorous 2-hour interrogation. They inquired about my proficiency in process improvement, my comprehension of healthcare economics, and my strategic outlook on the future of hospital administration. At no point did they inquire about my family name or any existing connections. I secured the position based entirely on my own qualifications. Commencing my role as an administrative intern at Havenbrook was akin to being plunged into the deep end of a swimming pool. The hospital network was grappling with pervasive inefficiencies that resulted in significant financial losses, antiquated admission procedures, redundant documentation systems, and inadequate interdepartmental communication. While other interns occupied themselves with shadowing executives and attending meetings, I dedicated my evenings to scrutinizing data, mapping operational workflows, and devising potential solutions. My initial significant contribution emerged 3 months into the internship. I observed that the typical emergency room admission process, from initial arrival to being assigned a bed, consumed an average of 4 hours, even for patients with non-critical conditions. After dedicating several weeks to meticulous observation, documentation, and analysis of each stage of the process, I identified 17 instances of redundant procedures and 9 points where paperwork was being unnecessarily duplicated. I devoted 18-hour workdays to developing a novel, streamlined system. Subsequently, I presented this proposal to the Chief Operating Officer, anticipating a dismissive acknowledgement and a return to mundane filing tasks. Instead, he leaned forward and stated, "How quickly can you implement this?" 6 weeks later, the average admission time had decreased to 90 minutes. The chief of the emergency department, Dr. Robert Kim, approached me in the hallway. "I've been attempting to resolve that issue for 5 years," he remarked. "How did an intern manage to figure it out?" I responded, "I didn't think like a doctor. I thought like a patient who has experienced prolonged waits in those rooms, and like a business owner observing financial resources being depleted." News of my success spread rapidly. Soon, department heads began seeking my assistance, requesting help with their operational challenges. I reconstructed the surgical scheduling system, redesigned patient flow within the cardiac unit, and established a new inventory management process that yielded a savings of $3 million for the hospital within its inaugural year. By the conclusion of my internship, I had received 3 distinct job offers from various departments. However, the CEO, Michael Torres, had alternative plans. "We are establishing a new role," he informed me. Director of Operational Strategy. "You would report directly to me, and would possess the authority to implement changes throughout the entire system. Are you interested?" I was 26 years old, having completed my education only 2 years prior, and they were offering me a position typically designated for someone with a decade of professional experience. My starting salary surpassed any figure I had previously imagined, although it remained a mere fraction of what I would have possessed as a member of the Herbert family. However, I had earned every cent of it independently, which rendered it infinitely more valuable. The same week I accepted the position, I received a wedding invitation originating from Colby Ridge. Matthew was set to marry Victoria Ashford, the daughter of another prominent medical family. The invitation was addressed to Ms. Alyssa Herbert and guest, accompanied by a handwritten note from my mother. "It would mean so much to have the entire family together." I marked the response as unable to attend, and returned it with a check for $100, a sum I could afford. I was aware that they would perceive this as an affront, this paltry sum from their estranged daughter, but it represented my own earnings, acquired through my own labor and intellect. That evening, I gazed at my reflection in the window of my new office, modest in size, but undeniably mine, and saw a person my family would not recognize. The young woman who had pleaded for an opportunity to demonstrate her worth had vanished. In her stead stood a woman who no longer required their validation. The subsequent 5 years at Havenbrook Medical served as an exceptional demonstration of my capabilities when provided with an environment that fostered belief in my potential. Every challenge the hospital encountered became an occasion for me to demonstrate that healthcare encompassed not only the hands that administered treatment, but also the underlying systems that facilitated the healing process. My inaugural year as Director of Operational Strategy was an intensely demanding period. The cardiac unit was experiencing a 30% increase in post-operative complications, not attributable to surgical missteps, but rather to inconsistencies in post-operative care protocols. I dedicated 3 weeks to shadowing nurses, conducting interviews with patients, and meticulously analyzing every aspect of the recovery process. The resulting solution was remarkably straightforward, a digital checklist system designed to ensure that every patient received a uniform standard of care, irrespective of the nurse assigned to their case. "You know what I appreciate about you, Herbert," Dr. Kim remarked one day, using my surname without any awareness of its significance. "You perceive the hospital as a dynamic entity, rather than merely a structure housing individuals who are unwell." The accolades soon followed. Healthcare Management Today published our admission process overhaul as a featured case study, and the American Hospital Association extended an invitation for me to address their annual conference. CEOs from other hospital networks began contacting me, extending increasingly lucrative offers in an attempt to recruit me. However, Michael Torres proved to be astute. Each time an offer was presented, he devised new strategies to retain my services at Havenbrook, including expanded responsibilities, improved compensation, and, crucially, the autonomy to execute my strategic vision without encountering administrative obstacles. By my 3rd year, I had ascended to the position of Senior Vice President of Operations, becoming the youngest individual to ever hold that title in the hospital's history. It was during this period that I encountered Jacob Vance, the hospital's newly appointed Chief Legal Counsel. He possessed exceptional intellect, demonstrated meticulous attention to detail, and was entirely unlike anyone within my familial sphere. His evaluations of individuals were based solely on their accomplishments, not their affiliations. "I've been reviewing your operational enhancements," he stated during our initial meeting, unfurling a collection of reports. "Are you aware that you have generated savings of $47 million for this hospital over the past 3 years?" $48.3 million. I corrected, then felt a blush creep up my neck. "Sorry," I mumbled. "Don't apologize for knowing your worth," he interrupted. "Most people undervalue themselves. You seem to have the opposite problem. You let others undervalue you." Something in his tone prompted me to look up sharply. "What makes you say that?" Jacob leaned back, studying me. "Someone with your talent should be running a hospital system, not just improving one, yet you've turned down every CEO opportunity that's come your way. Either you have unusual loyalty to Havenbrook, or something else is holding you back." That conversation marked the beginning of not just a professional relationship, but a friendship. Jacob became my sounding board, my strategic advisor, and eventually, the person who understood my complicated relationship with ambition better than anyone. "You know what your problem is," he told me one evening after I'd turned down yet another lucrative offer. "You're still trying to prove something to people who aren't watching." He was right. Of course, with every success, every innovation, every $1 million saved, a part of me was still that girl at the dinner table, clutching a business proposal that would never be deemed good enough. The holiday cards still arrived year after year, generic, impersonal things signed, the Herbert family, as if I were a distant acquaintance rather than a daughter. I kept them in a drawer, unopened. Matthew's children were born twins, according to the announcement, and I sent appropriate gifts from the hospital gift shop, signed simply, a Herbert. No acknowledgement was received. My 4th year at Havenbrook presented a new challenge. The board desired aggressive expansion, aiming to transition the hospital from a mid-sized regional system into a significant player in the healthcare market. They required an individual capable of evaluating potential acquisitions, overseeing integrations, and ensuring that growth did not adversely affect the quality of patient care. "I want you to lead this initiative," Michael told me. "You will have complete authority to assemble your team, investigate acquisition targets, and present recommendations directly to the board." That is essentially a C-suite position, I stated cautiously. Yes, it is. He smiled. Chief Strategy Officer, he announced. The board approved it unanimously. Unless you have another offer you're considering. I did not. For the first time in my career, I wasn't looking elsewhere. Havenbrook had become my home, my family, my affirmation that I had been correct all along. Healthcare was about more than individual physicians. It was about establishing the frameworks that enabled those physicians to perform at their highest capacity. My new role came with a team of 12 analysts, a corner office offering a panoramic view of the city skyline, and, most significantly, the authority to shape Havenbrook's future trajectory. We developed a 5-year strategic plan intended to position the hospital system as a regional powerhouse, concentrating on acquiring struggling practices and revitalizing them through the operational improvements I had pioneered. You are constructing an empire, Jacob observed one day as he reviewed our acquisition targets. A healthcare empire founded on efficiency and innovation, rather than on familial legacies and inherited wealth. That is the intention, I concurred, then paused. Actually, no. I'm not interested in empires. I'm interested in proving that healthcare can be both excellent and accessible. That operational efficiency doesn't mean compromising care. Spoken like someone who grew up around doctors who believed the opposite, he remarked quietly. I didn't respond, but he was correct. Every system I designed, every process I improved, served as a repudiation of my family's methodology, their conviction that administrative tasks were beneath them, their belief that efficiency was a concern for others, and their assumption that the Herbert name alone guaranteed success. By the conclusion of my 5th year at Havenbrook, our hospital system had expanded from 3 facilities to 7. By the end of my 5th year at Havenbrook, our hospital system had expanded from 3 facilities to 7. Our patient satisfaction scores were in the 95th percentile. Our operational costs were 40% lower than the national average, while our clinical outcomes consistently exceeded benchmarks. The night I was officially promoted to Chief Strategy Officer, I celebrated alone in my office, gazing out at the city lights. I had built something my family could never have envisioned, a healthcare system that thrived, not due to a prestigious name or inherited connections, but because it operated more effectively than its competitors. My phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. I almost disregarded it, but then I saw the preview. Alyssa, this is Matthew. Dad isn't well. Whatever transpired between us, he is still your father. Please consider returning home. I stared at the message for an extended period before deleting it. Years ago, they had unequivocally communicated that I was insufficient for their definition of success. Now, as I stood in an office I had secured through my own achievements, preparing to redefine the future of healthcare in our region, a realization dawned upon me. I no longer needed to prove anything to them. I had already proven it to myself. However, the true test was yet to unfold, though I was unaware of it at the time. In 6 months, a document would cross my desk that would irrevocably alter the course of events. It was a list of struggling private practices that Havenbrook was considering for acquisition. And at the very apex of that list would be a name I recognized with profound familiarity. Herbert Medical Associates. The acquisition report arrived on my desk on a rainy Tuesday morning. Rachel Martinez, my lead analyst, delivered it in person, an unusual occurrence that prompted me to look up from my computer. You need to see this yourself, she stated, placing the bound document before me. The list of potential acquisitions for the 3rd quarter. There's something you should be aware of. I opened the cover, my gaze sweeping across the executive summary. 12 private practices across the region, all exhibiting indicators of financial hardship or operational inefficiency. My eyes moved methodically down the list until they settled on the 3rd entry, Herbert Medical Associates, Colby Ridge. For a fleeting moment, the letters blurred before my eyes. I blinked, reread it, then compelled myself to continue scanning as if it held no personal significance. Rachel remained standing there, and she was perceptive enough to detect any unusual reaction. An interesting mix, I remarked neutrally. What is your initial assessment? Most are straightforward cases of aging physicians seeking exit strategies or practices that expanded too rapidly and became overextended. She paused. However, the Colby Ridge practice presents a different scenario. On paper, it should be flourishing. An affluent locale, a well-established patient base, a robust reputation. Yet, their financial statements suggest otherwise. I turned to the detailed analysis, my pulse quickening as I absorbed the presented data. Herbert Medical Associates was experiencing severe financial losses. Patient volume had decreased by 30% over a 5-year period. Their overhead expenses were disproportionately high in comparison to their revenue. Most critically, they had secured substantial loans against the practice's assets, loans that were approaching their maturity within 18 months. What is your theory? I inquired, taking pride in the steadiness of my voice. It's a classic instance of a refusal to modernize, Rachel stated. They are still relying on paper records in 2031. Their scheduling system is a relic from the previous decade. They employ 6 full-time administrative personnel to perform tasks that could be efficiently managed by 2 with the appropriate software. Factor in declining Medicare reimbursements and heightened competition from contemporary medical facilities, she added with a shrug. It serves as a cautionary example of becoming complacent with one's reputation instead of embracing adaptation. I closed the report with deliberate care. I need you to conduct a more thorough examination of all 12 practices, performing comprehensive operational audits, not merely financial reviews. I require complete information. Staff retention rates, patient satisfaction scores, technological infrastructure, and competitive positioning. Can you have that prepared within 2 weeks? After Rachel departed, I secured my office door and accessed the public filings for Herbert Medical Associates on my computer. The data revealed a decline that was even more pronounced than our initial assessment indicated. They had depleted their financial reserves, mortgaged the building, and were now 3 months delinquent on their equipment lease payments. My father's signature was affixed to every document, appearing progressively less steady as the dates advanced towards the present. I recalled Matthew's text message from 6 months prior, "Dad isn't well." Now, I grasped the full implication. It wasn't solely his health that was failing, it was the practice, their legacy, the entirety of what they had constructed, collapsing around them while they obstinately refused to acknowledge their need for assistance. For 3 days, I remained silent. I attended meetings, reviewed other potential acquisitions, and feigned indifference to Herbert Medical Associates, treating it as just another item on a list. However, during the nights, I found myself running various scenarios, calculating the resources required to salvage the practice, and envisioning the inevitable conversation that would need to take place. It was Jacob who finally confronted me. He appeared in my office on Friday evening, closing the door behind him. I saw the acquisition list, he stated without preamble. Herbert Medical Associates. That's not a mere coincidence, is it? I contemplated deception, then sighed. No, it's my family. The very family that deemed me unworthy to invest with my $30,000. I emitted a bitter laugh. Now they are worth less than nothing. There is a certain poetic justice in that, wouldn't you agree? Jacob took a seat opposite me. What are you planning to do? Logically, I should recuse myself, declare a conflict of interest, and allow someone else to manage this situation. However, they are on the verge of losing everything, the practice, the building, and likely their homes, considering my strong suspicion that they personally guaranteed those loans. Another buyer would simply strip the assets and close it down. The Herbert name would vanish from Colby Ridge after 40 years. Jacob inquired, and you are concerned about that? I remained silent for a significant duration. I am concerned about the patients, I finally responded. 2,000 families who have entrusted that practice for generations. I am concerned about the staff. Some of those nurses have been employed there since my childhood. They do not deserve to lose their livelihoods simply because my family was too proud to adapt. So, you intend to rescue them? I intend to do my job, I corrected. If Herbert Medical Associates represents a sound acquisition opportunity, we will proceed with acquiring it. They will receive the same terms as any other practice, no preferential treatment, and no lesser consideration. Jacob studied me intently. You understand that you will have to confront them, negotiate with them, sit across the table from the very individuals who informed you that you were not worthy of their time. I am aware, I replied. And you are prepared for that. I reflected on the young woman who had departed their home with nothing but unwavering determination. I considered the woman who had meticulously constructed a career by rectifying the mistakes of others. And I contemplated the executive who now possessed the influence to either preserve or dismantle their legacy with a solitary recommendation. They will enter our boardroom anticipating a meeting with some corporate executive who lacks an understanding of their value, I stated deliberately. Instead, they will encounter me. The daughter they proclaimed would never achieve anything significant, now holding their future in her grasp. That sounds like retribution. No, I asserted firmly. Retribution would be allowing them to fail, observing their complete loss, and taking no action. This is business. Cold, practical business. The fact that it compels them to acknowledge what I have become is merely an added benefit. I dedicated the weekend to meticulously preparing my analysis. The figures were stark but factual. Herbert Medical Associates could indeed be salvaged, but it would necessitate a comprehensive operational overhaul, the implementation of new systems, a reduction in staffing, and modernized workflows. The practice would persevere, but it would be rendered fundamentally unrecognizable. Everything my family had steadfastly maintained should be executed according to their methods, would be dismantled and reconstructed based on my own procedures. On Sunday night, I stood in my apartment, a penthouse now, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city, and reflected on the studio apartment where this journey had originated. I had validated everything I had intended to prove, yet I had never envisioned that this validation would manifest in this particular form, with their legacy quite literally held within my grasp. My phone rang. It was Michael Torres. Alyssa, I have reviewed your preliminary report on the Q3 acquisitions, specifically the Herbert practice in Colby Ridge. I observed that you have flagged it for personal attention. Is there something I should be aware of? This presented my opportunity to withdraw, to acknowledge the conflict of interest, and to remove myself from the entire situation. Instead, I heard myself reply, it is a complex situation that necessitates meticulous management. With your approval, I would like to personally oversee this acquisition. I am confident I can optimize the value for both Havenbrook and the practice being acquired. If you believe that is the optimal course of action, you have consistently guided us correctly. He paused. Arrange the initial meeting. Let us ascertain their interest in becoming part of the Havenbrook family. After concluding the call, I poured myself a glass of wine and observed the twinkling city lights below. In a few days, I would dispatch an email that would eventually reach my father's desk, formally requesting a meeting to discuss the future of Herbert Medical Associates. He would not recognize the sender's name, Alyssa Mitchell. Employing my middle name professionally had been an additional measure to create distance between myself and them. But when he entered our boardroom, when he beheld who was seated at the head of the table, I would smile, raising my glass in a silent toast to my reflection in the window. They had desired me to be a physician, to heal individuals one by one. Instead, I had evolved into something far more influential, an individual capable of revitalizing entire systems, rescuing faltering practices, and reshaping the very landscape of healthcare. And now, irrespective of their approval, I was the sole determinant of their fate, standing between them and utter devastation. The irony was exquisitely satisfying, yet it paled in comparison to the profound gratification that would later arise when they finally comprehended that the daughter they had dismissed as inadequate had achieved a level of success far exceeding their wildest aspirations. And that success was the sole reason they still possessed a glimmer of hope. The executive conference room on Monday morning felt akin to a strategic command center. Jacob was seated to my right, my CFO, David Park, to my left, and Rachel Martinez sat opposite the table, her laptop open. We were in the process of reviewing the acquisition strategy for Herbert Medical Associates when David posed the question I had been anticipating with a degree of apprehension. "There is something peculiar about this file," he stated, frowning at his screen. "The principal physicians share your surname. Alyssa, Dr. Richard Herbert and Dr. Matthew Herbert. Are they related to you?" The room fell into a palpable silence. Rachel's fingers froze above her keyboard, and even Jacob, who was already privy to the information, looked at me expectantly. I watched to see how I would handle this moment. "Yes," I replied simply. "They are my father and brother." David's eyebrows climbed towards his hairline. "That represents a significant conflict of interest, which is precisely why I am bringing it to your attention at this juncture," he stated. I maintained a level, professional tone. "I have contemplated recusing myself from this acquisition. However, I believe my intimate understanding of the practice's history and operational culture could prove invaluable in facilitating a seamless transition. The ultimate decision, however, does not rest solely with me." "Have you had any recent contact with them?" Rachel inquired cautiously. "No meaningful contact in over 10 years. A few holiday cards. I did not attend any family events. There has been no financial relationship since I was 21. I met each of their gazes sequentially. I can provide documentation of my complete financial independence if required." David leaned back, absorbing this information. "And they are unaware that you are employed by Havenbrook?" "They have no knowledge of my professional activities whatsoever. I use my middle name, Mitchell, for all business transactions." I then brought up a slide on the presentation screen. "Observe the figures. Herbert Medical Associates is 3 months away from insolvency. If we do not acquire them, they will be dismantled by creditors. Their patients will be dispersed without direction. Their staff will be left without employment. And your family will be financially ruined," Jacob added quietly. "Yes," I acknowledged. "But that outcome is inevitable regardless of my involvement. The pertinent question is whether Havenbrook stands to benefit from this acquisition, and whether my expertise serves to advance or impede that objective." Rachel chimed in, "From a purely analytical perspective, you are unequivocally the most qualified individual to manage this situation. Your comprehension of healthcare operations surpasses that of anyone else, and your insights into this specific practice could expedite our due diligence process by months." "But the optics," David murmured. "The optics are, in fact, in our favor," Jacob interjected. "If Alyssa can successfully navigate an acquisition involving estranged family members, upholding professionalism, and achieving favorable results for all stakeholders, it unequivocally demonstrates Havenbrook's dedication to making decisions based on objective merit. We are not an organization that allows personal relationships to dictate business choices." I rose and walked towards the window, affording them the space to deliberate. Below, the city thrummed with the vibrant energy of a Monday morning. Somewhere out there, 40 miles away in Colby Ridge, my family was likely commencing their week, utterly oblivious to the fact that their future was being determined within this very room. "Alyssa," David called out. I turned back towards him. If we proceed with you leading this acquisition, absolute transparency will be paramount. Everything must be meticulously documented, every meeting recorded, every decision justified by data. Complete transparency, of course, I finished. And if, at any point, personal feelings compromise the negotiation process, then I will step aside immediately. I am not driven by a desire for retribution, David. My sole interest lies in achieving a successful acquisition that benefits Havenbrook. He nodded slowly. Then I am comfortable proceeding. I agree, Rachel stated. The acquisition is sound based on its merits. Then it is settled, I declared, returning to my seat. Jacob, I will require you to draft the initial contact letter. It should clearly state that this is a preliminary discussion regarding potential partnership opportunities. Do not mention acquisition just yet, but allow them to believe they have options. You wish to offer them hope? Rachel inquired. I wish to bring them into the room, I corrected. Once they fully comprehend the extent of their predicament and our offer, they will realize that we represent their best, and indeed, their only viable option. The remainder of the meeting was dedicated to logistical planning. We would formally request financial documentation, conduct on-site visits, interview key personnel, and adhere strictly to established procedures, precisely as we would for any other acquisition. The sole deviation would be my personal attendance at the initial meeting, rather than delegating it to my team. After everyone else had departed, Jacob remained behind. You know, he began, they are likely to be angry, either at the situation itself or at you. Both, I acknowledged. You are about to embody everything they declared you could never become. That kind of cognitive dissonance often provokes a strong emotional reaction, he observed. Let them, I responded with a grim smile. Every emotional outburst merely confirms their inability to conduct business with professional detachment. It ultimately strengthens our negotiating position. Cold. Practical. You learned that from me. Remember, I countered, emotions are data points, not directives. Jacob shook his head in a gesture that conveyed a mixture of amusement and resignation. I appear to have created a formidable entity, he mused. A highly effective one, I must admit, but still a construct. That afternoon, I convened a meeting with my extended team. Word had already disseminated throughout the organization. Hospitals are notoriously poor at maintaining confidentiality, and I intended to shape the public perception of this situation. You have likely heard that our prospective acquisition in Colby Ridge involves my estranged family, I began, addressing the 20 individuals assembled in the conference room. I wish to clarify a few crucial points. Firstly, this acquisition will be managed with the same rigor and adherence to standard procedures as any other. There will be no preferential treatment or deviations from our established protocols. Secondly, my familial relationship effectively concluded over a decade ago, when I opted for a career trajectory divergent from their expectations. There are no residual emotional or financial connections. What if they attempt to leverage the familial connection to negotiate more favorable terms? A team member inquired. Then they will rapidly discover that my negotiations are not predicated on sentiment. I projected the practice's financial statements onto the screen. Examine these figures. They require our assistance far more urgently than we require their participation. This is one practice among 12 that we are considering. If they choose to make this personal, we will proceed to number 4 on the list. Marcus Chen, from the legal department, raised his hand. Should we prepare for potential litigation? Family businesses can become tumultuous, but there will be no litigation, I stated firmly. They will sign our standard agreement or forfeit everything. Those are their only two options. My role is to ensure they comprehend that, irrespective of our past history, the meeting continued for another hour, addressing every conceivable contingency. By its conclusion, my team was unified and resolute. Any curiosity they may have harbored regarding my familial entanglements was eclipsed by the prospect of executing a complex acquisition under demanding conditions. That evening, I remained late to finalize the contact letter. Jacob had drafted a professional yet impersonal message. I rewrote it, incorporating subtle nuances that only someone intimately familiar with the practice could include, references to their founding principles and acknowledgments of their contribution to the Colby Ridge community, alongside expressions of respect for their clinical achievements. Let them ponder, who at Havenbrook possessed such an intimate understanding of their operations. Let them experience a fleeting moment of hope, believing that someone recognized their intrinsic value beyond mere financial metrics, for this would amplify the impact of my eventual revelation. They would enter our boardroom anticipating an encounter with a sympathetic outsider. Instead, they would confront the daughter they had dismissed as inconsequential, now wielding the authority to either preserve or dismantle their entire life's work. I sealed the letter and entrusted it to my assistant for overnight delivery. In 48 hours, it would arrive on my father's desk. He would undoubtedly contact my mother and Matthew. They would deliberate, perhaps even argue, and certainly worry, but ultimately, they would have no alternative but to accept our meeting request. As I finally departed the office near midnight, my thoughts returned to the young woman who had once desperately sought a place at their table, yearning to prove her worth and contribute to the family legacy. Well, she was about to contribute, albeit in a manner far removed from their expectations. The following morning, I received a text message from an unknown number. Alyssa, it's Victoria, Matthew's wife. I know you're not in contact with the family, but I thought you should know the practice is in trouble. If you have any influence in healthcare circles, perhaps you could help, for the sake of what you all once were to each other. I stared at the message for a considerable duration, then deleted it without replying. Victoria's intentions were likely benevolent, but she failed to grasp the underlying reality. The very reasons for their current predicament were intrinsically linked to what we once represented to each other. They had instilled in me the conviction that familial ties were subordinate to professional accomplishment, that sentiment was a detrimental weakness, and that results alone held significance. Very well. I would demonstrate precisely what kind of results their teachings had yielded. On the morning of the meeting, I arrived at Havenbrook Medical's executive building at 6 a.m. The boardroom had been meticulously prepared the previous evening, water glasses precisely positioned, presentation screens tested, and documents organized in leather portfolios at each place setting. However, I required these quiet moments alone to gather my thoughts and center myself. I stood at the head of the long mahogany table, my fingers tracing the smooth surface. In 2 hours, my family would walk through those doors. They would see me for the first time in over a decade, not as the disappointing daughter, who had rejected their chosen path, but as the executive, who now controlled their destiny. My reflection in the dark window revealed a woman they would scarcely recognize. The uncertain girl clad in thrift store attire had been supplanted by someone wearing a flawlessly tailored charcoal suit, an ensemble that cost more than I had earned in 6 months working at that diner. My hair, once kept long at my mother's insistence that it was more feminine, was now styled in a sharp bob that exuded professionalism. Even my posture had transformed, shoulders squared, chin elevated, adopting the bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "You're here early," Jacob's voice remarked, interrupting my thoughts. He entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee, extending one to me. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. "Second thoughts?" "No," I replied, taking a sip and letting the warmth steady me. "Just preparing." They will undoubtedly attempt to make this personal. I need to be prepared for any emotional manipulation they might employ. Jacob settled into the chair designated for him during the meeting. "I have witnessed your adeptness in managing confrontational board members, irate physicians, and union representatives. This is, in essence, Just another negotiation. Except this is not, I stated, sitting down across from him. Those other negotiations pertain to finances, influence, and logistical arrangements. This, I gestured towards the empty chairs, is about identity, both theirs and mine. Walk me through your expectations. I closed my eyes, visualizing the scene. They will arrive 15 minutes early. My father despises being late. He will be wearing his customary lucky golf tie, the one he dons for significant meetings. My mother will be adorned in her pearls, likely the strand bequeathed to her by my grandmother. Matthew will attempt to assume control, positioning himself as the designated successor. They will assume they are meeting with some mid-level executive, perhaps hoping to leverage charm to secure more advantageous terms. And when they behold you, my father will freeze. He processes shock by becoming completely immobile. My mother will gasp. She has never been able to regulate her immediate emotional responses. Matthew, I continued after a pause, Matthew will become angry. He will perceive this as a betrayal, as if I have been orchestrating a scheme against them all these years. Have you been? The question lingered in the silence. Had every promotion I had earned, every system I had designed, every success I had achieved, been partly fueled by a longing for this very moment? No, I finally replied. I have been constructing my own life. The fact that it has led to this juncture may be a form of cosmic justice, but it was not a deliberate plan. My assistant knocked and entered the room. Ms. Mitchell, the Herbert party has arrived. They are waiting in the lobby. 45 minutes early, I noted. Even more anxious than I had anticipated. Instruct them to wait in the executive lounge, I directed. Offer them coffee, a journal, whatever they might need. We will escort them upstairs precisely at 9 o'clock. She nodded and departed. Jacob raised an eyebrow. Making them wait. It's protocol, I explained. We do not reschedule existing appointments simply because someone arrives early. I stood, smoothing down my skirt. Besides, I added, anticipation can make them more receptive to our terms. The longer they wait there, pondering, the more they will value any lifeline we extend. The subsequent 45 minutes passed with agonizing slowness. Rachel and David arrived, assuming their respective positions. My team assembled in the adjacent conference room, prepared to be summoned as needed for their specialized expertise. Every aspect had been meticulously choreographed down to the minute. At precisely 8:59, I assumed my position at the head of the table. Jacob sat to my right, David to my left, and Rachel was at the far end with her laptop open. The building's facilities manager would escort them up through the impressive marble atrium, past the walls adorned with numerous awards and recognitions Havenbrook had achieved, many of which were directly attributed to my efforts. The elevator chimed in the hallway. Footsteps approached, my father's confident stride. My mother's lighter footfall followed, then Matthew's impatient gait. I maintained my gaze on the financial projections displayed on my tablet, embodying an image of professional concentration. The door opened. Good morning, the facilities manager announced. The Havenbrook team is ready for you. They entered the room, projecting a forced confidence that thinly veiled their desperation. My father led the way, and yes, he was wearing his lucky golf club tie. His hair was thinner, demonstrably grayer, and his face bore the visible marks of recent stress. My mother followed, her pearls perfectly in place, yet her usually impeccable posture seemed slightly diminished. Matthew brought up the rear, his gaze already sweeping the room with a calculating intensity. Their eyes shifted from David to Rachel, then to Jacob, searching for the individual in charge. Finally, inevitably, their gazes landed upon me. The silence in the room became palpable, stretching as tautly as a held breath. My father reacted precisely as I had anticipated. He froze completely, his hand still outstretched for a handshake that would not be offered. My mother's soft utterance, "Oh my God," was barely audible. Matthew's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, dawning recognition, and then a flash of fury so swift it might have been perceived as comical under different circumstances. I rose smoothly, maintaining an air of professionalism. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady and clear. "I am Melissa Mitchell, Chief Strategy Officer for Havenbrook Medical Systems. Thank you for accepting our meeting request. Please have a seat." My voice was calm, pleasant, betraying none of the complex emotions churning within me. It was as if we were strangers, as if I hadn't spent hours weeping in my childhood bedroom while they told me I was squandering my future. As if this moment wasn't the pinnacle of my professional career. "Alyssa," my mother found her voice first, her tone a mixture of shock and disbelief. "What? How? What is this?" "This is a preliminary discussion regarding Havenbrook's potential interest in Herbert Medical Associates," I replied, gesturing towards the chairs positioned opposite me. "I believe you were provided with our initial documentation. Shall we commence?" Matthew's fist slammed onto the table. "Are you kidding me right now?" "Mr. Herbert," Jacob interjected smoothly, his tone disarming. "I understand this may be an unexpected development. However, we are here to discuss a business matter that holds the potential for significant benefit to all involved parties. Perhaps we could set aside personal considerations and focus on the opportunity before us." "Personal considerations?" "She's Matthew's voice escalated. "I am the Chief Strategy Officer reviewing a potential acquisition," I interrupted him. "Your perceived relationship to me bears no relevance to these proceedings. Now, you may either take a seat and discuss the future of your practice, or you may depart. However, should you choose to leave, Havenbrook's offer will be rescinded." "Offer?" My father's voice finally broke the tension, laced with a note of confusion. "What offer?" I slid 3 portfolios across the table. "Please have a seat. Let us discuss this as the professionals we all are." They exchanged glances, a mixture of confusion, anger, and a palpable sense of being trapped. Slowly, deliberately, they took their seats. My mother clutched her portfolio, as if it were a life raft. Matthew stared at me with undisguised animosity. My father appeared to have aged 5 years in the span of 5 minutes. "As you are aware," I began, initiating the presentation by pulling up the first slide on the screen. "Herbert Medical Associates is currently facing significant financial challenges," I stated, my voice steady. "Our analysis indicates that you have approximately 3 months before creditors will be compelled to initiate liquidation proceedings. Is that assessment accurate?" Silence descended upon the room. "Dr. Herbert," I addressed my father directly, "I require verbal confirmation that you comprehend the current financial standing of your practice. This conversation can only proceed under conditions of complete transparency." He swallowed hard. "Yes, that is accurate." "Good." I advanced to the next slide. Havenbrook Medical Systems is prepared to extend an offer for the complete acquisition of Herbert Medical Associates, which includes the assumption of all outstanding debts, the retention of clinical staff, and the continuation of patient services. In return, all physical assets, patient records, and intellectual property will be transferred to Havenbrook. "And what about us?" Matthew demanded, his voice sharp. "What will become of the partners?" I met his gaze coolly. "That would depend entirely on the results of our performance evaluations," I stated calmly. "Havenbrook retains its physicians based on merit, patient satisfaction scores, and their willingness to adapt to our operational standards. Your current resistance to modernization suggests that significant adjustments would be necessary on your part." "You are relishing this," he accused, his voice laced with bitterness. "I am conducting business," I corrected, my tone unwavering. Whether I personally derive enjoyment from this is irrelevant, I stated, my gaze unwavering. The only pertinent question is whether you wish to salvage any portion of your practice, or face complete dissolution through bankruptcy. My mother's voice, small and trembling, broke the silence. How did this happen? She whispered, her voice barely audible. How did you achieve success despite our predictions? I allowed myself the faintest of smiles. By working harder than anyone ever imagined possible. By earning every promotion, every opportunity, and every iota of respect. By developing systems that simultaneously save lives and conserve financial resources. By excelling at the very tasks you once deemed beneath a Herbert. The pained expression in her eyes caused me to momentarily waver. Almost, I reiterated, my resolve firm. The terms, my father stated gruffly, his voice strained. What are the precise terms? I navigated to the slide detailing the specific terms, each bullet point representing weeks of meticulous analysis. Havenbrook will assume all outstanding debts, totaling approximately $3.2 million. We will maintain the Colby Ridge location, but it will operate under the Havenbrook brand. All support staff will be offered positions at their current salaries. Pending performance reviews, the clinical staff, including the partners, will be evaluated individually. Evaluated. Matthew spat the word, as if it left a foul taste in his mouth. Yes, I confirmed, advancing to another slide that displayed performance metrics, patient satisfaction scores, clinical outcomes, efficiency ratings, and the willingness to adopt evidence-based practices and modern systems. Those who meet Havenbrook's standards will be offered contracts. Those who do not will receive severance packages. You expect us to interview for our own positions. My father's voice trembled with indignation. I expect you to demonstrate that you merit keeping them, I replied evenly. The same way every Havenbrook physician proves their value, the same way I proved mine, starting from absolutely nothing. David cleared his throat, executing his assigned role flawlessly. Perhaps we should discuss the alternative scenario, David suggested, his tone neutral yet firm. If Herbert Medical Associates does not accept our offer, bankruptcy proceedings will commence within 90 days. The practice will be dissolved, assets liquidated at a significant loss, and all partners will be held personally liable for any remaining debts, given the personal guarantees you have signed. I observed the dawning realization of their precarious situation. My mother's hands trembled as she opened her portfolio, her gaze scanning the figures that starkly spelled out their impending downfall in stark black and white. There is another option, Matthew interjected suddenly, his eyes flashing with a desperate, fleeting hope. We could find other investors, individuals who actually respect what we have built, rather than attempting to dismantle it. Rachel spoke up for the first time, her voice measured. With all due respect, Dr. Herbert, we have thoroughly analyzed your financial statements. Your debt-to-asset ratio, coupled with declining revenues and patient migration to competitors, renders you uninvestable by conventional standards. Havenbrook is extending this offer because we specialize in turnarounds, not because you represent an attractive investment opportunity. Inform them about the timeline, I instructed Rachel, maintaining a neutral tone despite the quiet satisfaction of witnessing Matthew's arrogance disintegrate. You have 5 business days to respond to our initial offer, Rachel continued. During this period, our team will conduct on-site due diligence. Should we uncover any undisclosed liabilities or misrepresentations, the offer will be adjusted accordingly or withdrawn entirely. This is extortion. Matthew erupted. You are leveraging our family connection to what? I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to shatter glass. To offer you more than any other buyer would, in order to save jobs that would otherwise vanish. To preserve patient continuity that bankruptcy would undoubtedly destroy. I leaned forward slightly. If anything, our familial connection is the sole reason I am not recommending we await bankruptcy, and acquire your assets at 20 cents on the dollar. My father's face drained of all color. You would do that to your own family? Do you mean the family that declared me unworthy of inclusion in their practice? I inquired, my tone maintaining a conversational quality, as if discussing the weather. The family that derided my business proposal and ostracized me for selecting an alternative path. That family, my mother whispered, her voice trembling, we were attempting to safeguard you. The business was intended for physicians, not for someone like me, I finished, my memory perfectly intact. You were correct. I was not suited for your conception of the business. I was destined for something grander. I transitioned to a new slide, illustrating Havenbrook's impressive growth trajectory, 12 hospitals, 4,000 physicians, 200 clinics. An integrated healthcare system serving over 1 million patients, all founded upon operational excellence, not familial lineage or exclusive social circles. Is this truly necessary? My father inquired softly. The presentation, the formality, still carried the weight of family. Alyssa. The word escaped my lips with more force than I had intended. I took a steadying breath, recalibrating my tone to professional composure. We were family. Now, you are a potential acquisition, and I am the executive tasked with determining if you are a viable entity for preservation. And are we? My mother's question was barely audible. Worth saving. I allowed the silence to extend, just long enough to make them feel the weight of their predicament. That depends entirely on your decision, I stated, my voice even. Accept our terms, submit to our processes, and adapt to our standards, and Herbert Medical Associates will continue as a component of a successful enterprise. Refuse, I paused, shrugging elegantly, and the outcome will be different. I must ask, my father said, his professional demeanor finally fracturing. Did you anticipate this outcome when you accepted this position? When you embarked on building this career, did you foresee that it would lead to this point? It was a question I had posed to myself countless times, I replied honestly. No, I did not foresee this exact outcome. I built my career for myself, to demonstrate that my perspective on healthcare, that it is more than just individual egos in white coats, was correct. The fact that this has afforded me the power to determine your fate, I added, a cold smile touching my lips, that is simply the universe possessing a sense of irony. Matthew rose abruptly. This is grotesque, he declared. You are the one who is sick, Matthew retorted, his voice dripping with accusation. Taking pleasure in humiliating us. Sit down, Dr. Herbert, Jacob intervened smoothly, his tone calm but firm. Or this meeting concludes now, and with it, any possibility of saving your practice. Matthew remained standing, his chest heaving with barely suppressed rage. My parents exchanged worried glances. Matthew, my father said, his voice carrying a warning tone. Sit down. You will allow her to do this. Your own daughter. And you will simply sit down. My father's roar reverberated through the boardroom. Matthew, visibly stunned by the outburst, slowly subsided back into his chair. My father then turned his attention back to me, and for the first time, I saw him clearly, not the imposing figure of my childhood, who had dismissed my aspirations, but a weary old man witnessing the disintegration of his legacy. The purchase price, he said quietly, his voice strained. What is your offer? David slid a single sheet of paper forward. Assumption of all debts, plus a modest payment for goodwill and patient lists. Approximately $200,000, to be divided among the partners according to their ownership percentages. I watched my mother's face crumple as the words registered. $200,000 for 40 years of dedicated work, for the practice they had envisioned would fund their retirement, secure their legacy, and provide for their grandchildren's education. That is an insult, Matthew stated, though the heat had entirely dissipated from his voice. That is mathematics, I countered. Your practice carries a negative net worth. We are offering you a viable exit strategy that avoids the pitfalls of bankruptcy court. We could have been partners, my mother suddenly interjected, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. If we had listened, if we had allowed you to invest back then. Yes, I agreed simply. We could have. Your $30,000 investment would be worth millions now. My systems would have averted this decline. We could have constructed something magnificent together. I paused. But you made your choice, and I made mine. So this is retribution, Matthew stated flatly. This is business, I corrected him. Revenge would be walking away and allowing you to drown. Instead, I am offering you a lifeboat. Not a yacht, not a cruise ship, but something that will keep you afloat. Whether you choose to accept it is entirely your decision. My father's shoulders slumped in defeat. We need to discuss this as partners, as a family. You have 5 days, I reminded him, standing to signal the conclusion of the meeting. Rachel will coordinate the due diligence schedule. I suggest you utilize this time to prepare your staff for the transition, rather than searching for alternatives that no longer exist. They gathered their portfolios with the movements of individuals who had just experienced a profound shock. My mother paused at the doorway, looking back at me with eyes that seemed to plead for something, forgiveness, understanding, a sign that her daughter still existed somewhere within this polished executive. I offered her nothing, merely a professional nod and a polite, thank you for your time. Once the door closed behind them, I sank back into my chair, my hands, which had remained remarkably steady throughout the entire meeting, now began to tremble. Are you all right? Jacob asked quietly. I've just destroyed my family, I stated, my voice hollow. No, David corrected, surprising me with his directness. They destroyed themselves. You simply refused to go down with them. Rachel was typing rapidly on her laptop. For what it's worth, she said, not looking up, that was handled masterfully. No one could accuse you of favoritism, or making decisions based on emotion. Because I displayed no emotion whatsoever, I murmured. You displayed strength, Jacob stated firmly. The kind they never believed you possessed. I gazed at the empty chairs where my family had been seated. In 5 days, they would sign our agreement. They had no alternative. The Herbert Medical Associates sign would be removed, supplanted by Havenbrook Medical. Their antiquated systems would be dismantled and reconstructed. Their autonomy would be extinguished. And somewhere within that process, they would finally comprehend that the daughter they had deemed insufficient had ultimately become more influential than they had ever envisioned. The irony was flawless, the satisfaction absolute. So why, then, did this triumph taste like ashes in my mouth? The due diligence visit occurred 3 days later. I personally led the team, an action I rarely undertook anymore, but this particular acquisition necessitated my direct supervision. As our convoy of black SUVs entered the Herbert Medical Associates parking lot, I was struck by its diminutive appearance. My childhood recollections had depicted it as an impressive medical complex. In reality, it was a modest 2-story building with dated architecture, and a parking lot in desperate need of repaving. First impressions. Rachel inquired as we gathered our equipment. Deferred maintenance, I observed, noting the peeling paint, cracked sidewalk, and outdated signage. They have been implementing cost-cutting measures for years, beginning with their facilities. Inside, the deterioration was even more pronounced. The waiting room furniture, which I recalled as elegant, now appeared worn and shabby. The reception desk was still equipped with the same telephone system from the 1990s. Even the characteristic scent was incongruous, that peculiar blend of antiseptic and decay that signaled a medical facility well past its prime. The staff observed our presence with poorly concealed anxiety. I recognized several faces, including Nancy, who had served as the head nurse since I was 10 years old. Robert, the office manager, who had once discreetly slipped me lollipops, and Elena, who had begun her career as a receptionist the same year I left for university. They all regarded me with a blend of astonishment and anticipation, as if I were destined to be either their savior or their executioner. "Good morning," I addressed them calmly. "We are here to conduct standard due diligence. Please proceed with your normal operations. We will strive to minimize any disruption." My father emerged from his office, his appearance haggard. "Alyssa," he began, his voice strained, "we were not expecting you personally." "I oversee all acquisitions of this magnitude," I replied deliberately, adopting my professional demeanor. "Is the conference room available for our initial review?" He nodded mutely and led us down a hallway. I could have navigated it blindfolded. The conference room, where I had once done homework while waiting for my parents, was now filled with boxes of deteriorating patient records and outdated medical equipment. "We have been intending to clear this out," he stated defensively. "Physical records?" David inquired, his disbelief palpable. "What is your electronic medical records system?" David inquired. We don't have one," my father stammered. "We have been planning to digitize." "Planning for how long?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. They had been planning to modernize their systems since before I had departed for college. My team dispersed throughout the facility, commencing their assessment of operational efficiency and their non-existent digital infrastructure. The finance team delved into their financial records, uncovering precisely the disorganized state we had anticipated. I oversaw the entire process, meticulously documenting my observations on my tablet, all while maintaining the pretense of detached professionalism. Matthew materialized around noon, attired in scrubs that had clearly seen better days. "Have you come to gloat?" he inquired, his tone laced with bitterness. "I've come to work," I corrected. "Where is Dr. Patterson?" "We need to review the physician contracts." "He retired 2 years ago," Matthew replied. "Couldn't afford to buy him out properly, so he simply left. Another senior partner gone, taking his patient base with him." I made a note. "You know," Matthew continued, leaning against the doorframe, "Mom cries herself to sleep every night since your meeting. Dad's had 2 panic attacks. But you got what you wanted, didn't you?" Revenge served ice cold. I looked up from my tablet, meeting his angry gaze with calm indifference. What I wanted was to be part of this practice. You all decided I wasn't worthy. Now I'm deciding if you're worthy of being part of mine. The irony isn't lost on me. But neither is the reality. Your choices led here, not mine. "Our choices," he corrected. "We were attempting to protect you from success," I interrupted. "From building something grander than a single practice, from revolutionizing healthcare delivery." "Yes. Thank God you protected me from all that." Nancy approached hesitantly. "Ms. Herbert, Ms. Mitchell, may I speak with you privately?" I followed her to the break room, another relic from my past, complete with its ancient coffee maker and motivational posters from the early 2000s. "I remember when you used to study in here," she said softly. "You had so many ideas about improving things for patients. You even sketched out a new triage system on napkins." "I remember that system," I replied. "Did you ever implement it anywhere?" "A variation of it is now utilized in all Havenbrook facilities," she stated. "We've reduced emergency room wait times by 67%. Her eyes widened. "I knew it," she exclaimed softly. "I knew you would accomplish something extraordinary." She hesitated, her gaze searching mine. "What will become of us?" "The staff," I clarified gently. "We are not family like you were." I corrected myself softly. "And the staff have nothing to worry about. Anyone willing to embrace new systems and adapt to Havenbrook's standards will be offered a position," likely with superior benefits to those you currently receive. And the physicians? I chose my words with care. That depends entirely on their willingness to adapt. She nodded slowly, a flicker of concern crossing her face. Your mother, she is not coping well with this. She keeps saying she failed you. She did, I stated plainly, but that is a matter between her and her conscience. My primary concern is ensuring the continuity of care for 2,000 patients. The afternoon yielded further revelations. The practice was in a more precarious state than even our most pessimistic projections had indicated. Suppliers threatened to revoke credit, insurance companies demanded audits, and 2 malpractice lawsuits were pending, not for medical errors, but for administrative failures. This is a disaster, David muttered as we reviewed the findings in the conference room. It's worse than the Riverside acquisition. And we considered that to be dire. Recommendations? I inquired. Honestly. Walk away, David replied candidly. The liabilities far outweigh the assets. We could acquire their patient base after bankruptcy for a fraction of the cost. Other opinions? I pressed, my voice steady. Rachel appeared uneasy. The brand holds significant value within the community, and the location is ideal for our expansion strategies, she stated, but financially, David is correct. This makes no financial sense, David mused. Unless, Jacob interjected quietly, his gaze fixed on me, we are considering factors that extend beyond purely financial metrics. All eyes shifted towards me, anticipating my response. They were waiting to ascertain if emotion would supersede logic, if familial connections would render me vulnerable. We will proceed, I stated firmly, but with amended terms. The assumption of debt remains unchanged, however. The goodwill payment will be reduced to $50,000. They will be required to sign more restrictive contracts, and the transition period will be shortened to 12 months instead of 18. That is harsh, David observed. That is commensurate with the degree of mismanagement we have uncovered, I countered. I closed my laptop. Draft the amended terms. They have 48 hours to accept. As we prepared to depart, my mother appeared in the lobby. She looked considerably older than her 65 years, her designer clothing hanging loosely on a frame diminished by stress. Alyssa, please, she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. Just 5 minutes. Not as a business discussion. Just, please. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded towards my team. I'll meet you at the vehicles. She led me into my father's office, the inner sanctum, a place I had rarely been permitted to enter during my childhood. Diplomas and awards adorned the walls, forming a shrine to past accomplishments. I know you despise us, she began, her voice trembling. I do not despise you, I stated truthfully. Hate requires emotional investment. What I feel is a professional detachment. That is far worse, she whispered. I would rather you hated us. At least that would signify you still harbor some feelings for us, she murmured. What is it you desire, mother? To apologize. To explain. To somehow make you understand that we believed we were acting in your best interest. You were acting in accordance with your vision of who I should become, I interrupted, my voice cutting. Not what was genuinely best for who I actually was. There is a distinction. You are correct. Tears traced paths down her meticulously applied makeup. We were wrong. Terribly wrong. And now we are paying the price. No, I stated quietly. Now you are facing the consequences. Payment implies a transaction where you still held some measure of control. This is simply reality finally catching up with delusion. You have become cruel, she stated, her voice laced with sorrow. I have become successful according to your standards, I replied, my tone measured. Often, they are one and the same. I stood to depart. You have 48 hours, mother. Sign the amended terms, or you will lose everything. That is not cruelty, I stated, my voice firm. That is mercy, especially when compared to what any other potential buyer would offer. I exited the office, leaving her weeping within the space that would soon cease to be theirs. In the parking lot, my team awaited by the vehicles, their expressions carefully neutral. Back to headquarters, the driver inquired. Yes, I confirmed. I settled into the supple leather seat, observing the structure diminish in the rearview mirror. Let's conclude this, I stated, my voice resolute. 36 hours later, the call came. Jacob knocked on my office door, as I was reviewing the quarterly projections for our other acquisitions. They wish to meet, Jacob said, knocking on my office door, as I was reviewing quarterly projections for our other acquisitions. Your father specifically requested a final discussion before signing. They are attempting to negotiate the amended terms. It certainly appears that way, Jacob replied. Should I inform them that the terms are non-negotiable? I paused for a moment, considering his question. No, I finally decided. Schedule the meeting for tomorrow. 4 p.m. The same boardroom. Let them make their case. Are you certain that's wise? Jacob inquired. Giving them false hope. I am granting them closure, I corrected. The opportunity to feel they fought until the very end. It will make the final signing process less arduous. The following afternoon, I personally prepared the boardroom. Every detail was intended to reinforce the power dynamic. Havenbrook's awards prominently displayed, financial reports showcasing our growth, and the city skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. When they arrived, they would see precisely what they had forfeited the opportunity to be a part of. This time, only my parents were present. Matthew's absence was significant. Either he couldn't bear to confront me again, or they had opted for a more emotional strategy. My father appeared to have aged years in mere days. His customary lucky golf tie was gone, replaced by a simple blue one that rendered him indistinguishable from any other businessman struggling with financial difficulties. My mother was dressed in black, as if attending a funeral. Thank you for agreeing to see us, my father began formally, his voice subdued. We have reviewed the amended terms, and they are undeniably harsh. The reduced payment barely covers our personal debts, and the shortened transition period necessitates rapid adaptation if we are to avoid immediate departure. Yes, I confirmed, that is precisely the intention. Havenbrook does not carry dead weight. Dead weight. My mother's voice cracked, laced with pain. Is that what we represent to you? In business terms, yes, I replied. Your outdated operational methods and your adherence to obsolete practices. In any other business context, you would have been replaced years ago, I stated. Familial ownership shielded you from market forces until even that protection proved insufficient. My father leaned forward, his expression earnest. Alyssa, I must ask you something, and I require an honest answer. Is any part of this motivated by personal vendetta? Are these terms intended as retribution for what occurred 15 years ago? I had anticipated this question and rehearsed my response extensively. However, as I sat across from them, observing the palpable desperation in their eyes, I opted for complete candor. The acquisition itself is not personal, I began. Your practice aligns perfectly with our expansion strategy, and we would pursue it regardless of the current ownership. However, I paused, my gaze meeting my father's. The terms themselves, yes, they are influenced by our history. Another practice facing similar challenges might have been offered slightly more favorable conditions, I conceded. Consider it a reverse family discount. So, this is retribution, my mother stated flatly. This is consequence, I corrected. You taught me that business is devoid of sentiment, that success demands difficult decisions, and that familial considerations represent a vulnerability. I am merely applying the principles you imparted. We were wrong, my father said quietly, his voice heavy with regret. God, we were so wrong about you, about what truly matters, about everything. Your realization comes 15 years too late, I stated. Does it? He reached for a folder I had not anticipated, pulling it towards him. I want to show you something. Inside were documents. I recognized my old business proposal, the one they had ridiculed during dinner. But it contained additions, notes in my father's handwriting, calculations, and research pertaining to the systems I had suggested. I kept it, he said. After you left, I studied it. Truly studied it, not with the dismissive glance I initially gave it. You were correct about everything, the scheduling system, the billing enhancements, the workflow optimization. If only we had listened. But we didn't. No, we didn't, he admitted. Pride, perhaps stupidity, certainly the absolute conviction that we possessed superior knowledge. He met my gaze directly. I have regretted that decision every single day since. Not merely because of our current predicament, but because we lost you, our daughter, who possessed the foresight to see the future while we remained entrenched in the past. Those are eloquent words, I stated, my composure unwavering. However, they do not alter the present reality. What would it take, my mother asked desperately. What would it require for you to forgive us, to be our daughter once more? I have no desire to be your daughter again, I replied. I have forged an identity that is independent of your approval or your surname. As for forgiveness, I considered the word carefully. Forgiveness implies a desire to move beyond something. I have already moved beyond it. This is not about harboring resentment. It is about the natural consequences of decisions made long ago. So, that is it then. We sign your terms, work for you for a year, and then disappear, my father asked. That is entirely up to you, I responded. Perform well, adapt to our systems, and demonstrate your value, and you could have long, fulfilling careers within Havenbrook. Refuse to change, and yes, you will be gone within a year. Work for you, our daughter, my mother whispered, her voice trembling. Work for Havenbrook Medical Systems, I corrected. I currently have 87 direct reports. You would simply be numbers 88 and 89. My mother stood abruptly, her face etched with distress. I cannot do this. I cannot sit here and pretend you are not my child. That I did not give birth to you, raise you, love you. Love me conditionally, I interrupted, my voice hardening. Love me only as long as I fit your predetermined mold. The moment I chose my own path, that conditional love evaporated. That is not true, I stated, my voice firm. How many times did you reach out during those 15 years? How many attempts did you make to understand my decisions, to support my career, even if it deviated from your desires? Silence followed my question. I thought so, I murmured. I produced the signature pages for the amended agreement. The terms are as they are. Sign, or do not sign, but make your decision now. This is the final meeting I will conduct on this matter. My father picked up the pen, his hands trembling. If we sign, if we work for Havenbrook, will we ever see you as more than our boss? Will you ever see us as family again? I shook my head slowly. That opportunity passed when you told me I wasn't good enough to be a Herbert. Now you have the opportunity to become employees of someone you deemed not good enough. Cosmic justice, as I mentioned, I stated, my voice devoid of emotion. He signed his name with the meticulous precision of a surgeon, each letter a quiet act of surrender. My mother followed suit, her tears falling onto the paper, slightly blurring her signature. Congratulations, I said, accepting the signed documents. Congratulations, I said, accepting the signed documents. You are now part of the Havenbrook family. Rachel will contact you tomorrow to discuss transition planning. I suggest you use tonight to inform your staff, and I recommend you frame it positively. They are about to receive improved benefits, modern systems, and job security they haven't had in years. And you, my mother asked, her voice laced with a hint of desperation. Will we see you during the transition? I oversee strategic initiatives, not day-to-day operations. You will be working with our integration team, I clarified, standing to signal the conclusion of the meeting. Thank you for your cooperation. This acquisition will ultimately benefit everyone involved, the patients, the staff, and even you, once you adapt to the necessary changes. They stood to leave, their movements appearing sluggish, as if they were moving through a dream. At the doorway, my father turned back one last time. Alyssa, I want you to know something. Seeing what you have become, what you have accomplished, I am proud of you. Prouder than I have ever been of anything in my life. I just wish. You wish you could claim some credit for it, I finished for him. But you cannot, I stated. I became this person in spite of you, not because of you. And that, I suppose, is the tragedy you will have to live with. He nodded, accepting the statement with a quiet resignation, and then they left. Alone in the boardroom, I stared at their signatures on the documents. In a few weeks, Herbert Medical Associates would cease to exist. The practice my parents had meticulously built, the legacy they had so fiercely guarded from me, would be absorbed into the empire I had constructed without their involvement. Victory is yours, Jacob said, his voice startling me as I hadn't heard him enter. Is it? I asked, a sense of hollowness pervading me. Then why do I feel so empty? Because revenge, even when justified, ultimately provides a hollow sustenance, he replied, coming to stand beside me. The question now is, what comes next? You have definitively proven your point, demonstrating to them the value they discarded. What is your path forward? I gathered the signed documents, the tangible evidence of my family's final surrender of pride. Now, I began, now I will do what I have always done, build something superior from the remnants of the past, without their involvement. And if they succeed? Jacob inquired, considering the possibility. If they adapt, evolve, and become the kind of physicians who thrive within our system. I contemplated this scenario, my parents, reborn as Havenbrook physicians, achieving success through the very systems they had once scorned. Then they will have demonstrated their capacity to learn, I concluded finally. Which is more than they ever gave me credit for. I departed the boardroom, carrying the signed agreements. Their weight felt heavier than mere paper should be. In my office, I filed them alongside the other acquisitions, just another folder in a drawer filled with conquered practices, yet I retained the key. The transition commenced the following Monday. I deliberately scheduled my travel to Tokyo for that week, engaged in negotiations for a partnership with an innovative medical technology firm. However, I continued to receive regular updates from the integration team, each report painting a picture that aligned precisely with my expectations. My mother diligently attended every training session, diligently taking notes, as if she were a medical student. My father encountered challenges with the electronic health record system, but persevered with a determined resolve. According to the reports, Matthew had requested an immediate transfer to any Havenbrook facility located outside the state. His request was denied. He was expected to fulfill his contract at his current location, or not at all. 3 months into the transition, I returned to headquarters to discover a different kind of report awaiting me on my desk. Patient satisfaction at the Colby Ridge facility had surged by 40%. Wait times had been halved. Staff morale, surprisingly, had also improved. They are actually succeeding, Rachel informed me during our morning briefing. Your parents, I mean. They have become exemplary Havenbrook physicians. Your mother even proposed an enhancement to our patient intake process, which we are now piloting system-wide. Good for them, I replied, my voice carefully neutral. What about Matthew? He submitted his resignation last week, Rachel reported. He couldn't adapt to what he termed corporate medicine. So, my brother had chosen pride over practicality. Somehow, that did not surprise me. 6 months passed. The Colby Ridge facility became one of our top-performing locations. I received requests from both my parents to meet and discuss their future with Havenbrook. I instructed my assistant to respond with standard form letters, directing them to their supervising physicians. Then, one evening, I found my mother in the hospital parking garage. She was standing beside my car, appearing smaller and older than I remembered. Security will escort you out, I said calmly, reaching for my phone. I am not here as your mother, she stated quickly. I am here as Dr. Catherine Herbert, a Havenbrook physician, to express gratitude to the Chief Strategy Officer for preserving the continuity of care for our patients. I paused, observing her closely. Is that truly why you are here? No, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I am here because I need to say something, and you need to hear it. Not for forgiveness, not for reconciliation, but for the truth. You have 2 minutes. We destroyed something precious, she continued, her voice filled with regret. Not the practice. You were right, that was already succumbing. We destroyed our daughter's faith in us. We taught you that love was conditional. That worth was measured solely by academic achievements and tradition. We were wrong. So fundamentally wrong, that it took the loss of everything for us to realize it. And I am grateful, she said simply. Grateful that you became who you are, in spite of us. Grateful that you saved jobs, preserved patient care, and even offered us an opportunity we didn't deserve. You could have let us fail completely. Instead, you have demonstrated that you are superior to us. I simply did what made business sense, I countered. No, Alyssa, she stated. You did what was right, even when we did not merit such treatment. She stepped back, her gaze resolute. That is all I wish to convey. I will leave now. But I wanted you to know that your father and I, we see you now. We truly see you, the brilliant, powerful woman who has constructed something magnificent from humble beginnings. And whether you believe it or not, whether it holds any significance for you, we are proud of the person you have become. She turned and walked away before I could respond, leaving me alone with words I had anticipated for 15 years. The final board meeting of the fiscal year included a comprehensive review of all acquisitions. The transformation of the Colby Ridge facility was highlighted as an exceptional success. My father had become something of a Havenbrook evangelist, mentoring other transitioning physicians in their adaptation to modern healthcare systems. A remarkable turnaround, Michael Torres commented. Your personal involvement with that acquisition has clearly paid off, Alyssa, Michael Torres remarked. It was a standard integration, I replied. The team deserves the credit. But he smiled knowingly. Sometimes the most effective form of retribution isn't destruction. It's transformation. Making them witness what could have been realized all along. After the meeting concluded, I stood in my office, gazing out at the city I had conquered, one innovative system at a time. On my desk sat a recently framed photograph. It was not of family, but of the first Havenbrook facility I had transformed, surrounded by the dedicated team, who had believed in my vision when no one else would. My phone buzzed. A message arrived from Nancy, the nurse from my parents' former practice. Your parents asked me to tell you they have established a scholarship fund at the medical school for students interested in healthcare administration, the message read. They named it after you. I deleted the message, but not before saving a screenshot. Power, I had learned, was not about crushing one's enemies into dust. It was about ascending so high that their opinions became utterly irrelevant. It was about constructing something so undeniably successful that even those who had harbored doubts were compelled to admire it. I had initially aspired to prove my worthiness of the Herbert name. Instead, I had demonstrated that the Herbert name itself was insufficient for me. I had transcended it, constructing something far grander, something entirely my own. My parents would spend the remainder of their professional lives as employees within the very empire built by the daughter they had once rejected. They would save lives utilizing systems designed by the child they had deemed insufficiently intelligent for genuine medical practice. They would cash paychecks bearing the signature of an authority I had earned independently. And I would continue building, innovating, and transforming healthcare, one broken system at a time. Not driven by revenge any longer, but by a profound discovery that my family had never comprehended. True success is not inherited, nor is it bestowed or dictated by the approval of others. It is created by those willing to dedicate themselves to harder work, to think innovatively, and to rigorously disprove every doubter. The office lights dimmed automatically as evening descended. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges, new acquisitions, and further systems requiring refinement. But tonight, I allowed myself a single moment of profound satisfaction. They had declared me insufficient. I had proven myself superior. And ultimately, that achievement held a value far exceeding any familial legacy. I closed my laptop, gathered my belongings, and departed for home. The young woman who had once pleaded for a place at their table was no more. In her stead stood a woman who had constructed her own table within her own boardroom, at the heart of her own empire. And at that table, every individual, even family, especially family, had to earn their place. The narrative concludes with the protagonist's profound personal and professional triumph, demonstrating that true worth is earned through hard work, innovation, and the courage to forge one's own path, independent of familial expectations or approval. The story concludes with the protagonist's successful establishment of her own professional empire, built on merit and innovation, demonstrating that true success is earned through perseverance and a commitment to one's own vision, rather than through inherited status or external validation.